Yeah. Ooh, that's never bad. Hey. Hey. Wow, you guys started clapping and nothing is even happening yet. Okay, can we hear me in the back? Yeah? Yeah? Welcome. Thank you guys so much for being here. Welcome back if you've been here before in years previous or even this year. My name is Patty Swanson. I'm the founder and executive director of Chicago for Chicagoans. It is my pleasure to welcome you. Oh, thank you. Polite applause. I love it. I love it. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our 6th annual lecture series. I can't believe it's been 6 years because my sense of time is completely gone to shit. But truly, it is really exciting to be back here. Our lecture series this year, if this is your first one, is themed Gone But Not Forgotten. So all of our speakers in our 12-part, 14-part, I don't know, in our lecture series, we'll be speaking about things in Chicago that no longer exist, but at one point were a really, really big part of Chicago history. So this is our 3rd lecture. I know you guys are very excited for our speaker tonight, and I'll give her a luxurious introduction in just a moment here. But before we begin, I want to go over some house rules. The house rules are tip your bartenders. Give it up for our bartenders tonight. There are no other house rules. But we do like to remind you guys that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are all volunteer run. I am a volunteer. Anthony, our assistant events manager, is also a volunteer. Our board members are volunteers. So this entire effort, this entire organization happens because of free labor. So if you guys love what we do and you want to support what we do, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to us tonight. We accept literally any type of money that you have. You can donate online at chicagoforchicagoans.org/donate. Or if you're here in person, we have these awesome QR codes scattered around the room that you can scan to pay us with Venmo or Google Pay or whatever it is you have. You can also give us cold hard cash. We accept all types of money. And that money goes directly towards the hard costs of our organization. So that pays for the website, that pays for our liability insurance. Please don't sue us. That pays for all of our speakers. We always offer money to our speakers, though many of them choose to donate back their time. We really do appreciate all your donations. And you probably noticed this event is technically free to attend. All of our events are pay what you can, and that's because we service Chicagoans. We don't market actively to tourists, though tourists are welcome. We don't actively market to tourists because we're here to teach Chicagoans more about the history of their own city. And we do fundamentally believe that every Chicagoan deserves to learn about the history of their own city, no matter how much money they have in their pocket that day. So by donating at the end of this event, you support somebody who maybe is less fortunate, who might be in the audience next to you tonight. Now that I have very politely asked you all for money, it is my grandest of all pleasures to introduce our speaker tonight. She is a board member for our organization. I met her planning events for Atlas Obscura many years ago, where we got into crazy shenanigans very quickly. And she does a lot of other things. You might know her from Effing Chicago. You might know her from her Twitter presence, which is poppin'. Or you might just know her for being a general nerd. She used to run a blog for a long time. It still exists. You can check it out, called Dead in Chicago. If you want to know all the crazy ways motherfuckers have died in Chicago history, Leyla is your gal. But there is one other topic of extreme importance and specialty in her repertoire, and that is Chicago theaters. Now, we're not talking about stage. We're not talking about vaudeville. We're here to talk about movie palaces, motherfuckers. So Layla's going to take us back in time 100 years ago or so to what it was like to attend the movies 100 years ago, and make sure around the room you will find these beautifully designed programs for this evening. Shout out to Nick for doing this great design for us. you can also find a link to the digital program if you're watching online. I'll paste that in the comments if you haven't already found it. Give me a few minutes. But check out your program. This is your plan of action for this evening. And without further ado, I'm going to give it up to Leyla. So please give her a nice warm round of applause. Hello. Hi, everybody. Ooh, what a welcome. How wonderful. My name is Leyla. That was quite an introduction from Patty. I love it. Yes, this program today will be our guide for the talk. It has all of the topics that we will be discussing, and it has several photos and fun advertisements here. We will be going over all of that. As Patty mentioned, I am a huge, movie palace nerd, movie palace fan. I have called myself in biographies that I've had to write about myself, which is terrible to do, Balaban and Cat Stan, which is extremely accurate. I got my start and my interest really working, with the history of movie palaces when I started working at the Chicago Theater back in 2008. I am sorry to say that I had never been in the building before. I started working there. I just got a job as an usher, and I was in college, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, first job. And then I walked in there, and I was like, what is this place? It's gorgeous. Oh, my God. And then I got really into the history. I found out that they did tours there. I was like, I want to be a tour guide. When they had openings there, I showed up with, history reference books, which you don't need to be a tour guide. But I was like, look, I want to do this. And they were just like, yeah, you're hired, of course. You're a nerd. So I still work there doing tours, and I kind of have taken that interest to the max, and I have done, I don't know, hundreds, if not over 1,000 tours at the Chicago Theater. I think my last estimate was I probably have talked to at least 12,000 people in person about that place, and I still love doing it. I am a huge nerd, and I love movie palaces. So, without further ado, our program for the evening, which, by the way, I would like to point out, this program, by the way, is modeled after this program, which was handed out in May of 1923 to people who attended this show at the Chicago Theater. So I decided to mimic it for this program. Ooh. Emphasis again, I am a nerd, and my partner is a wonderful graphic designer. So, by the end of this talk, I'm going to try and sit back if I can, because I'm sitting right on the edge of the chair. This is awkward. Okay. My goal is, by the end of this, if any of us decide to time travel back to the 1920s in the near future, and you want to go see a movie, you will be well prepared to know what theater to go to and what to expect and what kind of a show you are going to see. Yes, we all have these plans in the near future, right? As soon as they invent it. Oh, yes. Yes, you'll start seeing me pop up in old photos of the Chicago Theater everywhere. So, if you want to go to a movie in the 1920s, you want to go to a movie palace, of course. There are theaters everywhere in the city. 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. This is the entertainment. This is the thing to do. There isn't anything else. You want to have fun, you're going to go to a theater. And there are local neighborhood theaters that you could go to, but that's not nearly as fun as going to a movie palace. Really large theater. And if you go to a movie palace, you're probably going to be going to a Balaban and Katz establishment. Balaban and Katz were the most successful movie theater chain in the city of Chicago, and pretty much every other theater chain, even if the building didn't start out as a B&K theater, it ended up as a B&K theater because they just bought all the other chains and they bought all the other theaters and they ended up running them. Now the first photos that we have here, these two lovely gentlemen, these are two of the Balabans. We have AJ and we have Barney Balaban. Now, the Balaban family was pretty large. I'm not sure exactly how many kids there were, but 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, parents here. And the parents were immigrants to Chicago from Eastern Europe. They were Jewish, and they originally weren't in the theater business.
1890s, early 1900s, the Balabans had a grocery store on Maxwell Street, and they found business to be pretty difficult. A lot of their clients bought things on credit and then couldn't afford to actually pay them. And then the Balabans couldn't pay the people that they got the food from. Not the best business model. But pretty quickly, they started seeing all the theaters pop up, all these little Nickelodeons showing films. And they realized, you can't pay for a movie on credit. You have to put that nickel in the box. This could be a really good business opportunity. So the family pooled money together, and they rented the Kedzie Theater on the west side. I forget exactly how much it was, but I think they had like a year-long lease at $100 a month, something like that. Something that was very expensive for them and kind of a risk, but they decided as a family they were going to go for it. They had Barney here on top to help manage a lot of the business, as he did for Balaban and Katz, and eventually he would become the president of Paramount for about 30 years. And yeah, they were very successful. And then AJ down here, who did a lot of the work in putting the shows together and finding the talent. The small theater was initially pretty successful, and they wanted to kind of change the vibe, I guess you could say, because previously the theater had like a barker in front of it, so people just yelling at you like, hey, come in here, you, no, 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 no. And they didn't want that, so they got rid of the barker, they made it a little bit classier. People started to go to it. They liked it. It was successful enough that when there was a plot of land for sale in the neighborhood, there were a bunch of different small theater owners that were trying to get that plot of land to build a bigger theater. And Balaban and Katz, or Balabans, they were able to buy that land, and they built the Circle Theater. That was successful enough. Eventually, they built the Central Park Theater, which is the first like full-fledged movie palace in Chicago, and one of the first full-fledged movie palaces in the United States. I think the only one that's earlier than that is the Strand in New York, which opened like 2 years before the Central Park. The Katzes were family friends who were also in the entertainment business, so they decided to join up to become the Balaban and Katz Company. Nice little logo on the front here for them. And operate theaters. Now I've talked a little bit about, your small neighborhood theaters and then the large movie palaces. And there's some like general criteria for movie palaces, at least what we have here on the next page is the criteria I use to define a movie palace. So they're very large, 1,500 seats. I'm being kind of generous saying 1,500 seats here. I would almost say it's more like 2,000 plus seats. But the Central Park Theater is only like 1,700, and that's technically a movie palace. So like very small end, 1,500 seats. These places mostly had like 3,000 to 5,000 seats. Imagine going to see a movie with 5,000 other people. It's a lot. They were way over the top in their decor. There were a few different styles of movie palace that you can find. You had this kind of like fantasy-inspired, vaguely faux historical architecture. So you have like French Baroque and Spanish Baroque were two really common themes. For example, the Chicago Theater is in a French Baroque style, which meant that the architects just stole famous things out of different buildings in Paris and smashed it all in one building and then kind of like added onto it to really frou-frou it up. Yes, it's great. I love it. Why not? You also have atmospheric style theaters, which, have any of you been to the Music Box Theater here in Chicago? Yes, Music Box, Aragon Ballroom, those are all atmospheric ideas. So atmospheric is where it looks like when you're sitting in a courtyard in Spain and you can see the small town turrets around you and the sky has clouds that are projected on the ceiling moving around and twinkling lights. That's atmospheric style. Music Box is not a movie palace, but it's an atmospheric style neighborhood theater. Anyway, getting into like little details that no one cares about but me.
I care.
You care. Okay, great. Thank you. And then you also have some like Art Deco theaters, and Art Deco movie palaces are built more on the later end of the movie palace era, so like early 1930s. Biggest example is going to be like Radio City Music Hall, which is really like the end of the giant theater movie palace era. Movie palaces are also like this uniquely American architectural form, which is pretty cool. And they were only around from about 1915 to about 1932. So a really short moment in American history here. But they were everywhere. every town in America had a big movie palace. That's what you did. So the front photo here is, of course, the Paradise Theater, if you couldn't figure that out from the two signs that say Paradise here. This is a Lost Chicago or Gone But Not Forgotten lecture series, so the Paradise is probably my #1 theater that I would go see if I could time travel, because it looks awesome and amazing, and it was like way over the top and atmospheric, and there were like full-size plaster horses above the stage, like galloping out of the audience. I don't know, it was ridiculous. But it's not around anymore. On the west side, like Madison and Pulaski-ish. Yeah, there were a lot of big theaters right in that area. Around the corner from the Paradise was the Marlboro Theater, which I don't have a picture on here because I wasn't actually going to talk about it, but the Marlboro and the Paradise were kind of like competing theaters. They both sat like 4,000 or 5,000 people, which is crazy to think of like these giant movie palaces a block away from each other. And there were a lot of other small theaters in the area too. Eventually, when demand started to die down for movies, the Paradise was demolished first. I believe the sound in there was not nearly as good as the Marlboro, and then eventually the Marlboro went down too. We've lost a lot of these places.
Is it true they raised Paradise and put it in the parking lot? Somebody had to do that.
That's good. We're going to kick in.
So I can't remember what's there now, but it might actually be a parking lot. Fun fact about the Paradise, though, the Styx album Paradise Theater is based off of the like overall overarching story of the Paradise, from like this amazing garden, wonderful theater that was then like destroyed and torn down because no one cared about it anymore. The picture that they use on that album is totally not the Paradise in Chicago, but it was inspired by the story of the Paradise Theater in Chicago. Anyway, random fact for you, amongst a lot of random facts. Look at these other wonderful theaters. Next page. We have the Chicago Theater. This photo was taken about a week after it opened, so this is from about like October 31st, 1921. And we've got the Uptown Theater here in 1925, right when it opened. Imagine walking up to one of these places at night, especially the Chicago Theater. Even now, seeing all these wonderful lights and everything flashing, it really draws you in. The show begins on the sidewalk for these places. If you're coming to a movie palace to see a film, you're not just coming for the movie. In fact, for a lot of these places, the ballet bands were saying like, yeah, they might come for the movie, but they come for the experience of going to the movies. They come for the theater that they like to go to more than they're like, I really want to see this Joan Crawford film. That's just kind of icing on the cake. And you can really see that here. Next couple of pages.
So the Uptown was Balaban and Katz too?
Yes, the Uptown was Balaban and Katz, yes. The Uptown was Balaban and Katz, as was the Riviera, which is across the street from the Uptown Theater. There were a lot of movie palaces everywhere. There's also one about 3 blocks away that they ended up running called the Pantheon Theater, so, you know.
What about the Harding? Was that Balaban and Katz? Or Dona?
The Harding.
It's on the north, it's on Milwaukee Avenue.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's called the Harding Tavern now. It's
Yeah.
that area.
Question is, Harding Theater, Balaban and Katz? I don't know off the top of my head. My gut instinct is telling me it was, because I think I've seen some ads for it that were under B&K, but I cannot remember off the top of my head. That would be a quick Google, would not bother me. So looking inside, we can see some of the house right and house left of the Paradise Theater. So you can see just kind of the opulence and the design that went into these places. So you have this beautiful surrounding, these beautiful experiences when you're coming in here. You are, you have this architecture, you have statues that are as big as you, if not bigger. And you also had a lot of amenities when you went to a show at a movie palace. We flip to the next page. And we look at the top, and we can see the photo here of the children's playroom at the Avalon. So if any of you are planning to time travel and bring your kids with you, and you don't want to deal with them, you could just dump them at the playroom, because this is a pretty common thing in Balaban and Katz theaters and in movie palaces all over the place. This started off not with specific playrooms, but like the Central Park Theater about 1915. If mothers came with children in baby carriages, they were encouraged to leave them outside on the sidewalk, and they would put a number with the child, and you could go in and watch the movie. And if the baby started crying, it would just flash on the screen, like, mother number 47, your child is crying. Please come take them. So yes, imagine doing that. So they made it a little bit safer when they started putting in playrooms to these places. And they would still have it that you could go, like it would flash on screen if your child was really throwing a fit. But they had nurses and babysitters to take care of the kids there. They would have first aid stations in case anything happened to you as well. Some theaters also have like soundproof screening rooms, so if your child is screaming and you still want to watch the rest of the show, you can go there and deal with them, and no one has to hear it, but you can still see what's going on screen. Yeah, great idea. Yes, a cry room. Thank you, yes. If you decide to go to a movie palace in the summer, you know that you will be nice and cool when you get in there. Theaters were some of the first public places to have air conditioning. This was technology that was actually pioneered by Barney Balaban. Balaban and Katz here. The Central Park was, I believe, the first theater to have air conditioning in it. Before he got full-time into the theater business, he worked at like a meat processing plant where they had the ability to cool the meat and keep it refrigerated. So he just took that technology and he put it in theaters. And this was great because it meant that these theaters could be open during the summer, where previously they would have to close because it was too warm out. But now you can come in and you can be refreshed by the pure mechanically cooled air inside of a Balaban and Katz theater. Back in the day, they would remind people of this with advertisements where they would cover like the names of the theaters with icicles in them. So you would look at it and be like, oh, I do want to be cool today. I'm going to head down to the like Riviera or the Oriental and hang out. These advertisements would also, on the topic of child safety, tell parents that they could send their kids on the L alone to whatever theater, and they would hang out there and keep cool all day during the summer so they didn't get into too much trouble. The service you would get at a theater was top-notch. We can see these gentlemen who look like they're in the military and throwing gang signs here in the very middle. They do. I'm not sure when this photo is from. I think it's like 1930s, 1940s. Honestly, these guys all kind of look like assholes, and I don't know if I'd ever want to hang out with any of them, just looking at their face. But they are ushers here. And the hand signs they are showing you are just coordination signs that they can use between themselves to get people in and out of seats quickly. So, for example, if you wanted to be able to look at another usher and say, hey, I got a pair of seats here for someone else that is trying to find a pair of seats for a couple, you can just make eye contact, hold up 2 fingers like this. If you got 2 pairs of seats, then it's live long and prosper, and you can do this kind of a thing. So you would have to know all of these hand signals to work here. Every part of being in a movie palace is being in a show. So all of the ushers here are trained military style, usually by graduates from West Point Academy. It was an intense school that they would have to go to, and when they would change out shifts, they did it publicly, and it was like changing of the guard session. So if you were hanging out there, you can see this and also be like, oh, wow, okay, yes, I feel like I'm in London. This is very fancy. If you wanted to work at a Balaban and Katz theater, you had a lot of very strict requirements that you had to meet. This was if you wanted to be an usher, if you wanted to be an usherette, if you wanted to be a matron, a nurse, a maid, a doorman, a footman. They had different uniforms, different training. It was very complex, the system that they created. And Balaban and Katz were so intense on this. They wanted to make sure that all the customers got this great experience with this great customer service that they actually printed out a book, if I can grab it here, in 1926 called The Fundamental Principles of Balaban and Katz Theater Management. which I have sat down and read this whole thing through. Yes, thank you very much. And it details out exactly how you should train and hire people to work in the theaters so that everyone will be able to provide the best customer service. Any movie palace you want to go to, if you time travel back to the 1920s, you're going to get the same kind of service. Kind of like now how if you get coffee at Starbucks in Chicago versus New York, you're going to expect the same service. You're going to expect it to taste the same. Balaban and Katz were kind of pioneering that back in the day with their movie theaters. They wanted to make sure that every guest felt like they were royalty coming in there and they got that same treatment no matter where they went. So, how strict are they on these hiring requirements? The page opposite of the gentleman here, this is from the book that I was just holding up. And these are just kind of general requirements for the employees here. They do get very into specifics, by the way. Working here, they would say like what, if they wanted men or women working in a certain position, what race they wanted, height, weight, age range, everything. They had like one idea in mind and they basically said if you deviate from this, your business will fail. Like it literally says that in the book. So you have to have a clean-cut appearance. By a clean-cut appearance, we have in mind an applicant of normal size and physique and pleasing features. This is very important because of the fact that the first impression received by our patrons is that which is received through the sense of sight. You have to have a radiant personality. Personality is that quality or those qualities which distinguish one individual from another and is the projecting of those distinguishing qualities in each individual contact with our patrons. The quality is rarely found, but it is one which can be developed through constant effort. It is your duty as manager to correct continuously and call to the attention of each of your employees any acts or expressions which do not measure up to this idea of radiant personality. So I'm just imagining you have someone watching you being like, no, head needs to be tilted that way. No, didn't like that tone of voice. Which it kind of was. You also have to have a wholesome character to work here. By wholesome character, we mean a straightforward, honest, sincerity of purpose, and an earnestness of desire to perform each duty with credit. This is necessary in order to build loyalty, which is one of the greatest consecutive forces in any organization, without which little is accomplished and many mistakes are made. So yeah, real strict on this. No, you definitely couldn't do that today.
Sounds like what they used to do to the flight attendants.
Very similar to the flight attendants, yeah. I wonder what the correlation is there between like working in theaters like this to airlines. I wonder if there is any. Yeah, there might be. Yeah.
Maybe when the palace is closed, then
They moved into the airline business. Yeah, it could be. Decline of movie palace is about the same time we get like the rise of air travel in the U.S., so that would make sense. Kind of taking those values over. Yeah, you can't do a lot of this now, again, because they specified who they would hire by race, gender, weight, age. Like, none of this is good.
But it sounds like the Army, basically.
Yes, it is very much like the Army. And again, training by like graduates from West Point, so yeah, very much like the Army here. So you know you're going to get the best of service. You can drop your kids off if you don't want to deal with them, and hopefully they won't scream too much so they aren't going to flash your name on the screen. You'll have to go take care of them. You're going to hang out. It's going to be nice and cool when you're there. If you don't feel like watching the show itself, the whole building is the show, is the experience, right? So they would have lounge rooms that are covered in fine furnishings, antiques, marble sculptures that they had imported over from Europe. I have another drink. Oh. Fun fact, these places did not have food or drink inside. They had water. Yeah, they would have water fountains there, but they didn't really have concessions, not like you think of it today. Most of these places would have like candy shops next door. So if you wanted something, you could buy it and kind of hide it under a coat and then bring it in there during the show itself. So yes, if you didn't want to be in the show, you could hang out in these beautiful rooms full of fine furnishings. They would leave things out that like you wouldn't be able to leave out today because people would break them or steal them. Like they would timely to hear the glass break, right? People would do that. They would break shit. They would nowadays, but they would have like Dresden figurines out just on display in like the women's restrooms, so you could hang out there. They always had, of course, women's and men's separate like lounge and smoking areas too, so you could hang out separated by gender if you didn't want to deal with the men. And they usually had entertainment in the lobbies as well, so if you didn't like what was actually going on the stage and you wanted to hang out, you could listen to someone playing the piano in the mezzanine foyer or something like that. So, you're going to a movie palace. How much do you guys think you're going to pay for this wonderful service, this wonderful surrounding, the show that you're going to see?
Nickel.
25.
10.
Yeah,
Nickel.
right.
25 cents. 25.
Whoever is only paying the nickel is going to go to the old theater on the corner. You're not getting to the movie palace. Whoever's paying $1, you're overpaying at this point. Most of these in the 1920s, it was like they would have different pricing depending on when you got there. So it was usually maybe like for the morning bargain show, you're paying like 35 cents. If you're going for the like deluxe evening show, high traffic time when everyone wants to go, you're going to be paying like 66 cents. And today, I think this is around $8 or $9. So it's pretty cheap. Yeah, not bad at all. Like I would pay that for all of this. I pay more for a lot less nowadays, right? When you got to these theaters too, especially if you're going to the big main show, it was not reserved seating. It was first come, first serve. There were a lot of people coming in. Most of these places, again, 5,000 seats. You're dealing with 10,000+ people a day coming in and out of this. So it was wherever you can get a seat is where you're going. And then when you come out, that's it. You're done. If you see part of the show and you want to stay, you usually were able to stay to see the next half of the next show as well. These shows would run continuously all day long. A.J. Balaban came up with this idea for his shows of continuous performance. He always wanted something on stage, so people would always stay there. So if you go in like the mid-1920s especially to see a show, you're probably going to be seeing a big presentation show. And they call these unit shows. And you had basically everything going on. These shows would last about 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2 hours, 20 minutes, something like that. And they would happen about 5-6 times a day, just back to back to back. A lot of work for those performers on stage, just on from like 11 a.m. to like midnight some days. And the movie is the main attraction, but there's a lot more to it beyond the film. In their heyday, Balaban and Katz had departments that were set up in entire buildings to create costumes and sets and sceneries to go with these productions. And this unit show would set up shop at a theater for about a week, and then they would take the whole thing out and move it to another one of their theaters. So if you live close to the Uptown and you don't feel like traveling, you can go to the Uptown once a week, every week, and you can see a different show. If you really like that show and it moves from the Uptown to the Tivoli, well, then you can trek across town to see the same show at the Tivoli. If we look at the next page here, the one with the ad that says Tivoli on the right-hand side, we can see an example of how they advertise this and some of the things that you would see in these shows. So the Tivoli ad here is cut in half. I love the illustration at the top of this. If you look, it's like an usher without a nose leading the way with these two very well-dressed people. The woman looks like a bug because she has giant antenna coming off of her hat here. And the man looks just like wall-eyed because he has no nose, a giant line for a mouth, and two bug eyes that are like facing out this way. But the usher is moving him around, and it's hard to see because it's a little bit small, but the collar on the usher here actually says Tivoli, which I think is like a cool little design in the cartoon here. So there's a lot of 1920s ad copy, which just gets super wordy, and I'm not going to read it all, and it's just talking about how great the Tivoli is, and prepare yourself to go to the Tivoli, because, oh my god, it always says this kind of stuff. But here, where it says starting today at 2 p.m., we can read a little bit of the show that you would see if you happen to go here. So there's an overture with the Hungarian Rhapsody by Liszt. So you get some piano music in here, some classical piano music. Then that's followed by a scenic with appropriate musical accompaniment. So who the hell knows what they played. But a scenic here is going to be like pretty film pretty pictures on screen of some scenic area, right? So you get a little movie there where you're looking at the Grand Canyon and they're playing majestic music, whatever. Then we have Carmen, the opera. When they use the opera and classical music at these places, it was always like the short pop version of it. Like you're not going for Wagner's Ring Cycle that's like 20 hours long. So Carmen here, they list what they're playing, but they're just playing the hits of it. So you get a little bit of opera there. So now we're very cultured, right? We have some list. We have the opera. We've seen the Grand Canyon. It's very, very beautiful. They have topical events. So you're going to have a newsreel, see what's going on in the world. An organ solo. So you have a famous organist who is going to be playing a popular tune of the day. A lot of the times when they had these, they would also project the words up on screen. So going back a couple pages here. You can see underneath the kids' playroom where it says, "I wish the stars were a million guitars." So if we wanted to all sing along together in a giant chorus of 5,000 people to the organ, you could do that. Popular songs. We all love singing together in choruses, right? Happens all the time, modern times. Okay, music box, yeah. I guess I'm not going to the right things. I don't know. Man, if I go to the music box, I'm going to like horror films. I went there for a horror movie this Monday, and it was, yeah, they're not singing on that, but it would be pretty funny. Anyway. So we have that. We have a literary digest after that, which I'll be honest, I have no idea what the hell that is. So I guess someone's talking about a book or something. Then you have a prologue, which is usually going to be like a short film, something called Childhood Memories, which relates to the main feature, a film called The Old Swimmin' Hole, which I love that this ad describes it as a screamingly funny comedy. So I guess, it's great. Who knows? Whatever. So you get this whole show in like 2 hours, 2 hours, 20 minutes. 66 cents, yes. If you're coming for the evening. If you like want to play hooky, or you're like a housewife and you want to drop off the kids, you can do that, and it's going to be cheaper. It'll be like 55, maybe 35 cents, depending where you go. Pretty good deal, right? It's a lot of entertainment. They wouldn't just have like this is a pretty good definition of like a general show that you would see here. And again, it's going to repeat every day for a week, 5 times a day. But they would also have specialty shows at the theaters too. They said they had like syncopation weeks, so like jazz bands on stage, and those were always super popular. You'd get a lot of people in for that. Chicago theater specifically, what this program is based off of, used to do a season of Sunday noon like symphonic concerts, fall through spring, and then in the summer they did Sunday noon organ concerts, which is actually what this is advertising on the back. There you go. And across from the Tivoli on the left-hand side, this is a program that was given at the Chicago Theater. It's got the date on the top there. That is from this pamphlet here. So you can see if you wanted to come for the like symphonic and hear the orchestra. Most of these places would have like 150 to 100 person orchestras as well. Sometimes they would accompany the film. Sometimes they're just playing these like classical pieces for you to listen to. Basically, there's something for everyone here. Another way that they could draw people in beyond having like this mixture of different shows was they would have famous stars come in to perform for these shows. So 2 of my favorites are on the very next page. The 2 people at the organ here. We have Jesse Crawford and his wife Helen Anderson. And they're both very proficient organists who worked together at the Chicago Theater at first. Then they moved to New York and they worked at the Paramount. Jesse Crawford is, and he probably still is the biggest name in like the theater organ world, because the theater organ world has not evolved a whole lot since the 1930s. Okay, imagine why. I think he's really cool. But like his name sold tickets. As you can see this ad here, like they realized pretty quickly that people liked Jesse Crawford, so they would put his name and his face on advertisements because people would come in to see Jesse. They liked him so much that they would ask for his autograph. And I maybe have this hanging in my office and pretend my name is Marjorie.
Nice.
So this is Jesse Crawford here. He always looks really cross in like every photo I've seen of him. He looks like he's annoyed to be there, which is hilarious. And then this is his wife, Helen Anderson, right here. So Helen, she didn't make quite as much of a name for herself as Jessie did. Like, she wrote some songs, but they're always attributed to, like, Mrs. Jessie Crawford. Not Helen Anderson yet, right? But Jessie was really good at ballads, and she was really good at, like, fast playing and jazz stuff, and they would do duets at the Chicago Theater. And there was a little bit of a scandal with them when they first started there. Balabin and Katz stole Jesse Crawford from Los Angeles, where he'd been working at theaters. He moved here. He started playing at the Tivoli Theater, which was on the south side. It was a big Balabin and Katz theater that opened February of 1921. And then the Chicago Theater opened in October of 1921, and that was their big flagship. So Jesse immediately moved there because he was like the big organist, not quite a star at that time, but he was the best organist, so they moved him there. And shortly after Jesse started playing at the Chicago, he met Helen. She was also an organist, of course. She worked down the street. She was not well known, so she wasn't doing these star spots, but she would be doing like the more grunt work of accompanying the actual film on stage. We knew needed some sort of a musical accompaniment to it. They met. They very quickly fell in love. They very quickly got married. Biggest problem with that, Jesse had moved to Chicago from California with his wife and 2 children. Oops, yes. So, yeah, they met. Jesse turned to his wife, Olga, and they cried, they got divorced. I don't know what happened. Olga left the scene with the kids, and then they got married, and it became this whole thing of like the twin, or like the husband and wife organist playing the twin consoles at the Chicago Theater because they installed a second console at the Chicago Theater so they could advertise like these double concerts. And it was another way to bring people in. On top of that, you would have like famous band leaders that would be there, so people would want to come for these specific band leaders. And of course, they're always booking outside talent that's traveling to Chicago too to try and put in for these specific shows that are going to be there for a week or so. So one example of that is John Philip Sousa was there with his band, and I think they had to pay him like $10,000 to stay at the Chicago Theater for a week for shows, which is a lot of money. Also, like, he had a whole band with him, so I kind of get it. But so we just have another example here on the left-hand side of what you would see at a show. This, I think it's from like early 1922, so pretty early in the 20s. At the Chicago, the Wonder Theater of the World. Balabin and Katz frequently like gave their theaters different names. I think the Paradise was like the Garden Theater of the World. The Chicago is the Wonder Theater. I don't know. Whatever you can do to market it. But this ad I really love because it's a wonderful performance starring Norma Talmadge. And you'll notice that she's supported by Harrison Ford.
Wow. Not the Harrison Ford.
Yeah, either not the Harrison Ford or he's a lot older than we think. I don't know. He did the time travel thing, yeah, he figured it out. Gotta ask him where he got that time travel so I can go back there too. The next page here, we have an ad that's a little bit older, or a little bit newer than some of the other ones I've been talking about here. On the left for George White's Scandals of 1940. Just kind of like a Broadway review show that he toured around, inspired by like the Ziegfeld Follies. And it was around from about 1920 to 1940 or so. So this ad is great. If you went to the Chicago to see this, on stage, complete musical comedy review. 12 scenes, cast of 60. 40 scandals, beauties 40. I don't know why they reversed that, but they did. There's also a movie with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in there. And then just across from this on the right-hand side, we can see 2 pictures from that show. On the top is just a shot someone took from the audience. There are a bunch of women playing piano and some kind of like a cool piano background there. So this just gives you a little bit of an idea of like the stage show that they would have for these things. Because of course the movie is the main show, but the stage shows, like, again, they had entire departments that were dedicated to building out stages that had these themes and costumes that would match it. So sometimes they had like little stories. Sometimes they were just like, look at these pretty women on stage standing in the American flag. Next thing. And that's kind of what we can see going on here. And then the bottom, you can see just the lobby of the Chicago Theater and exactly how packed it would be, especially if you were between shows then. So you would just kind of be smushed in there waiting until the last show left, and then it was your turn to go in there. I'm really excited to have these photos in here. They're not the best quality. I'm hoping to get better qualities of them. But they are pictures from negatives that I just found by happenstance on eBay. So I don't think these pictures have been seen by many people in the past like 80 years. So yeah, this might be the first time we're seeing like the 1940s George White's Scandals show since June of 1940 when this was on stage, which I think is really cool. So not the best shot, but like awesome that we get to see that. And just on our last pages here, we have another ad for the opening of the Paradise Theater, the garden spot in the world in the heart of the Great West Side. Again, that's what they're calling this, the garden spot at the Paradise. And just an example of what you would see for an opening act there. And again, it's pretty similar to what you see for all these giant shows that they had going in. So, to make a long story short, if you want to go time travel back to the 1920s, make sure you go into a movie palace. It's going to be easy to spot. They're super lit up at night, right? They're going to be giant. You're going to see lines wrapped around the block. They're not going to be your rinky-dink theater on the side that only has like 300 seats or whatever. We don't want to go there. You're not going to get that same kind of service. You can bring your kids. You can drop them off. You can forget about them, hopefully, unless they cause too much trouble, and then that's your problem again. You'll have time to admire all the finery. You'll be able to hear some opera, some classical music, maybe some jazz. You'll see a movie. You'll see a short. You'll see pretty pictures of scenery or something. I don't know. Maybe a little stage act with that too. And if you like it, you can continue to sit there and watch it again. And if you don't, you can leave and you can go to the movie palace next door and see what they have to offer for the day. And last but not least, opposite of the Paradise, if you want to work at one of these theaters, you can read through these ads from the classified section from the 1920s looking for people to work at their theaters. My personal favorite here is the one on the bottom that says Models Wanted. This is an ad looking for young woman about 5 feet 4 inches tall, of slender figure, pretty, graceful, and refined, for pleasant work at the Tivoli. These are women that they hired at these theaters to wear pretty costumes that match the decor of the building and stand there and be like, yes, this way, yeah. They had this at the Chicago, they had this at the Oriental, they had this everywhere. I just think it's a really funny ad, and I hit almost none of these requirements. So
Well, didn't they sell cigarettes? Cigars? Right.
Cigarettes.
I don't think they did initially. They definitely like had smoking lounges so you could smoke in there. They might have had stuff for sale like in there, but a lot of these places didn't have anything for sale because unlike today where like you're going to go to an amusement park and you pay to park and you pay to get in and you pay for really shitty food, blah, 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 blah. These theaters you would pay to get in and then you got all of this service and you could expect it with the ticket. So they usually didn't have things for sale because they didn't necessarily want you to go in and then think, oh, now I got to spend all this extra money on food or drinks or whatever. On that note too, I forgot to mention all of the employees that they had strict rules that they were not allowed to accept tips either. So you get all of this wonderful service. I'm sure you could probably bribe people for better seats or something, you know, just underneath, you know, but you weren't supposed to do that. So, yeah. So I hope you guys feel a little bit more prepared now if you want to go see a movie in the 1920s. Any questions?
Why did they die out?
Why did they die out? That is a great question. The short answer is television. Yeah, why would you go to a movie theater when you can sit at home on the couch and watch TV, right? And then everyone stopped living in the cities where the movie palaces were and started moving out to the suburbs, and then it's just harder to get down here, so they died.
So they had 3,000 to 5,000 seats. How
Yes.
often were these theaters sold out?
So, the question is, if these theaters have 3,000 to 5,000 seats, how often were they sold out? The answer is often. They usually had lines around the block.
How often did the average person go to the movie palace?
Oh, this is a good question. How often did the average person go to the movie palace? I have this statistic somewhere in my notes. somewhere, but I don't have it in my head. A lot. I think
Probably
the average.
a lot, because
Yeah.
it's before TV. So this
It's
is their
before
only-
TV.
yeah.
It's like basic radio. Like this is kind of the thing to do, and it's affordable. So I think most people are going at least once a week, if not more.
Okay, so at least.
Yeah.
Oh, did the Depression or World War II have anything to do with the drop in attendance?
Depression and World War II have anything to do with the drop in attendance? Yeah. Depression is when a lot of like the big presentation shows kind of started to drop off. Like they would still have things going on, but instead of having like ridiculous costumes that they're spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a year to build out these things, they're dropping that, and then they're focusing mostly on the film and maybe like one small thing accompanying it. Movie theaters were notorious for all sorts of like weird schemes to try and get people in the 1930s too. So they would have like the carnival glass, the depression glass, where you come every week, and if you come every week for a year, you get an entire dish set, kind of a thing. So like come one week and you get a teacup, the next week you get the saucer, and like it encouraged people to come in. A lot of these places also had, I think they're called like bank nights. Which were like kind of legal, kind of not. And it was like a pot of money that, I forget exactly how they worked. But it was basically like a lottery where it was like a pot of money, and if your name was called, you had like X amount of minutes to get to the front of the stage to get the pot of money. But it meant like you had to come into the theater, and technically you didn't have to buy a ticket to be part of the lottery, but you had to buy a ticket to be in the theater. They're like vaguely legal. But anyway, a lot of places did that to get them in. And then, yeah, World War II, like right after that is where, especially early 1950s, you have TV and everything just immediately dropped off. I did find one statistic recently that was saying like between the early 40s and early 50s, like half the theaters in Chicago closed. So.
I have a question from the internet.
Internet question.
How did Chicago's movie palaces compare in opulence and number to those in New York, LA, and other
That's a
cities?
good question.
Oh, damn, that's a really good question. Shout out to Walter. Okay. Yeah, pretty much. So
I mean, they have them. We've seen them.
we have, yeah,
Together.
we did.
Sure Chicago's the best of all.
I mean, I'm going to say that, and I also say that the Chicago Theater is the best theater out there, and I'm very biased. So, my first response to that is I can't really say because I don't have enough knowledge about the theaters in New York or in Los Angeles to give that, like, a very valid response. The little bit I do know that I have seen of theaters in, like, Los Angeles and New York is they're pretty equal. These places were popping up all over the country. They all had similar ideas of having these giant stage shows along with the movies and along with the organ and the music. And they were all extremely over the top and opulent. Radio City Music Hall definitely like is king of everything else in terms of just like size and the money and time that they put into that place. That's also like the very last of like the big theater movie palace era. So I think they're all like comparable, just like a little different.
Did Belleville Kids only build in Chicago, or did they kind of go anywhere? I mean, is that kind of...
Good question. Did Belleville and Cats go anywhere else beyond Chicago? They did. They had other theaters that they would own or operate outside of Chicago. In 1926, they ended up... I forget the whole merger, but like they ended up merging with Paramount and becoming associated with Publix, which is how Barney Balabin got the job as president of Paramount. So he moved from Chicago to New York. So then there was a lot of transfer between like show ideas and like what we were doing in Chicago, we started doing in New York and vice versa. And then they were running theaters, I believe, in like Detroit and in the Midwest as well. Yeah.
What is the status of the Uptown?
This is the question everyone asks. Yeah.
It's happening to close Uptown Theater in Minneapolis this weekend. It's like everywhere you go, the Uptown Theater is closed.
I know. Everywhere has an Uptown Theater too. We only have one Chicago theater. There was another theater called the Chicago Theater though, before the Chicago Theater. Anyway. I don't know what the status of the Uptown is. Closed. It's... Yeah. The story that I have heard multiple times from people who are working in the building and working close with Jam Productions, who owns it, is they are still trying to get funding to begin any major work. There are dedicated volunteers who are able to spend time making sure that like the boiler is on and the pipes don't freeze and take care of any major damage, but there's still a lot that needs to be fixed. And they are also able to get some money from like film productions, because they will go in there and film things, and that's always good when they do that, because they have money, and if they want something to work, they'll fix it. So they pay for like electric to get fixed or to like make part of the theater look nice. So that's always good too. But it's still closed, undefined.
Erica chimes in, our preservationist board member chimes in to say, they're still owned by Jam Production, who sucks.
I did not say that.
That's bad, that's bad.
Blame ownership.
Hey, Lila. Do you have any favorite movies from the 20s, 30s?
Favorite movies from the 20s, 30s? That's a really good question. You know, funnily enough, I really like movie palaces and movie theaters, and I don't know nearly as much about silent films. Like, I like to watch the movie, but I'm also the person who's like, wow, that's the same finial top that they use at this other theater. Oh my god, look how this is set up. Like, I'm this nerd. And if you meet me or other people like me, like, we never shut up about theaters. It's just so
You're
forever.
more on the architectural side.
Yeah, I'm more on the architectural side. Favorite movies from them? Well, I'll tell you about my favorite movie that I've never seen, because it's a lost film and I really want to see it. And it's an F. Murnau film called The Four Devils. And it is a movie about like a troupe of 4 flying trapeze artists. And apparently at the end it has Alfredo Cordona doing like a triple through a flaming hoop. And I do flying trapeze for fun, and I really like circus. So this like gets all of my interests of 1920s and circus and like lost movies. So I really want to see this one. And he's a great flyer too. He's in like Tarzan and stuff. Anyway, so that's my answer.
Was there a tiered system for the theaters? Like, was there one where all of a certain class of people went versus another class?
Depends on the theater. Most of the movie theaters were not separated out by class. If they were segregating by race. Balaban and Katz did not officially do that. That being said, they hired by race. And I haven't found anything like official saying that they sat black people in certain areas of the theater. You do find more, this is something I need to research, and you will find people saying like, oh, I read my grandfather's letters saying he worked as an usher there in the 1920s and he felt so bad that they always made him seat the black people in the back. And if you look through like the Chicago Defender archives, which is a black newspaper here in Chicago, they'll talk about people suing like I think the Tivoli and the Chicago Theater because they came in, they couldn't sit in certain seats, and they got in fights with the ushers, and they weren't being sat in those seats because they were black. So officially, no, they had no segregation. Like, they even specifically say in this book at one point that they do not like judge people based on like race or creed or religion or something, but it still happened unofficially.
I have another internet question.
Yes.
How quickly did news make it onto newsreels shown at theaters?
Oh, that's a really good question. I have no idea. Probably within a day or two would be my guess.
Let's try a different one. When did movie palaces start bringing food into their amenities?
Oh, that's another really good question. And another one I don't know off the top of my head. I think that would have been started probably about 1940s, 1950s, when you have attendance dropping, and it's a way to kind of try and bring more people in again, make more money. Because I know
of the 50s, I remember there being concessions.
Yes, yeah, for sure. One of my favorite photos of the Chicago Theater is from, I think, the early 50s, and it's the lobby with this giant concession stand that is no longer there. So yeah, just when you're trying to bring more people in, make more money, and I know nowadays I think theaters make like 50% of their profits off of concessions. Yeah. So support your theaters and buy popcorn.
What were, so if they wanted you to stay forever, did they have like any sort of food, and what were those food items on offer?
No. The question is, they wanted you to stay forever. Did they have any food items, and what did they have to offer? They didn't really have food items there. So you could come and you could see the show, and like if you miss half of it, you could stay for the next half. But like you're gonna get hungry, so you're probably not gonna actually stay there all day. Yeah. Water fountains, smuggling chocolate, candy. roast beef. I don't know.
Today I think of the Chicago Theater as a stand-up comedy venue because that's what they've been doing.
Yeah.
When that became a mainstream form of entertainment in the 40s, I want to say, was there a resurgence in some of these venues?
Was there a resurgence of what exactly is your question?
Did people start going back to some of these venues when stand-up comedy became a big thing?
Well, I mean, you had like comedy acts, and I don't know if it's like officially stand-up comedy, but you had comedy acts even way back when these places opened. Because like the vaudeville acts would usually be part of the show. Like if you're not having like a scenic thing or like the classical music, maybe you have a vaudeville act or something. So that was always inherently part of it. In terms of like the Chicago theater specifically, they, well, like most movie theaters, they would have these huge shows and then they eventually dwindled down to just movies, and then most of them would close after that, after they just couldn't make any money. That's what happened at the Chicago. They eventually switched to just movies, I think in like the late 50s, I can't remember. And then they closed and had a renovation in the 80s and reopened only as a live venue, and that's comedy and music. So it's always kind of like a part of it, and I think nowadays a lot of these places, if they are still open, have moved to that just because that's what people will go see live.
Someone else asked how prohibition impacted movie palaces.
Oh, that's a good question too.
Wow, the internet's stumping you.
It is. I mean,
Well, they weren't allowed to drink in there.
yeah. I mean, these things came to rise during Prohibition, so like you couldn't drink already when most of the movie palaces were built. I'm sure people smuggled stuff in because like I would. Who wouldn't? Like the ushers aren't gonna care once you're in there as long as you're not causing a scene. Like no one cares. But yeah, I don't really think it had too much of an effect otherwise.
Well, if you gave her usher a little bit of moonshine.
Yeah, if you gave the usher a little bit of moonshine, maybe you get a better seat. Is that technically considered a tip? Maybe. I don't know.
Do you have a favorite, like, behind-the-scenes story you haven't told us?
Do I have a favorite behind-the-scenes story I haven't told?
From Chicago theater?
From Chicago theater? Oh boy, that's a good question. God, I feel like most of my Chicago theater stories are not like, well, I'm thinking like backstage. Most of what I've done there is like front of house work, so I don't spend too much time backstage. Good question. I was leading a tour there once, and Anita Baker was performing that night. And, like, it's written into, as far as I understood it, it was, like, written into the contracts that, like, if you have a show going on, there's tours, like, there are going to be tours during the day. And, like, we kind of work around each other pretty well. But she didn't know that, and she was yelling at me to get out of the building when I had, like, a group of 20 people. And I didn't know what to do, and I just, like, smiled and shrugged, because I was like, give it a tour, like, it's supposed to be here. And then a minute later, production came out, was like, and she was like, oh, okay, and, like, walked away. And that was, like, vaguely terrifying. So one time, so when I started working at Chicago Theater, I worked there as an usher, and I did usher work there for 6 years. And one of the times I was working the aisle 4, so that's the main aisle on the main floor. And it was Diana Ross who was performing. And me and the other ushers realized pretty quickly that in the row, not sitting together, but, like, just next to each other, like right behind each other, was Secretary of State Jesse White and Fabio. What a weird combination. So everyone was going up to them, and they were both very nice and getting photos. And, like, I'm not doing that because I'm on duty, but I can't imagine these people who have photos of them standing in between, like, Jesse White and Fabio, who still has the very long hair and had a friend being like, I'm with my friend Fabio, like, yelling it out so everyone knew. But at the end of the show, I was standing at the back of the aisle watching Diana Ross, because you get to work there, you get to watch the shows, right? Nice little bonus point. And Jesse White and Fabio were back there, and I was chatting with them both a little bit. So I got to say, like, I spent a Wednesday night watching Diana Ross with Jesse White and Fabio, and I was like, this is a weird night. They were very nice. I don't know. I remember Jesse White being like, wow, this is a great job. It's so much fun. I'm like, yeah, it is. Thanks. He was just like, his security guard was at the back and was like, oh, he's just going to hug everyone. And we watched as he slowly walked up the aisle and gave people hugs and talked to everyone. It was really funny. So yeah, that's what comes to mind.
What years did you work there?
So I worked as an usher 2008 to 2014, like very end of 2014, quit in like December or something. Tour guide 2011 to now. We do not have tours at the Chicago Theater. They have stopped due to COVID. I do not know if this is something that will start up again or what exactly is going on with that. I hope it does. I am still employed there as a tour guide.
We'll hire her privately.
I can convince them to let me lead private tours every once in a while. It does not happen very often. I am hoping to do some work there this year, though. There are, I'll call it like an archive room of a lot of old things that has not been organized. So I am hoping to go through and kind of organize, see what it is. It's like signed photos of famous organists and like movie stars and people writing in letters and like photos. Yes. Things that will keep Leyla interested for hours on end. So I'm hoping this year that I'll be able to go in and like spend some time working there and organizing all that stuff. And my overarching goal for this year is to start working on a book on the history of the Chicago Theater, because there is not one that is out specifically on the building, and I know a lot about it and have a whole lot of vaguely organized documents on it. So that is my overarching goal for the year.
Hot dog.
See if it helps.
Somebody online, Victoria, wants to know about any Chicago Theater ghosts.
Specifically at Chicago Theater?
Yeah.
No. I'm sorry. So, no, like the, when I started working there, they're like, you can tell these ghost stories, but like, they're not real. Okay. So officially, no, there are no ghosts at Chicago Theater. I don't know of any real stories of anything happening. That being said, I love being in that building. I think it's great. It's my favorite place to be, and I feel like it has very good energy in there. And I had someone on a tour once come up to me afterwards and be like, I'm a medium. There's no ghost here. There's just a lot of excitement and happiness and like ready for the show to start. And I was like, that's basically how I feel about this place. So cool. And then every once in a while, I would have like vaguely weird things happen to me, which, like, when I say them all together, it makes it sound like a ghost. But when you think about, like, these are 4 things that happened over, like, 15 years, it's just weird things. But I had one winter where no one was in the building and it was, like, really dead. And every time I was, not every time, but 2 or 3 times I was in there, like, the automatic toilets would flush on their own. Where I'd, like, be in the hall and the toilet was here and it would flush. And I would look up and I'd be like, I know no one's in there. And I know security is at their, like, booth. There's no one else but me and, like, the security guard in here. That's weird. I had that happen when I had a tour with just 2 people. And I was like telling them that the building, like the toilets are flushing on their own. And then it happened when we were on stage in the backstage toilets. And they're like, oh, and they got a little spooked. And cause I was like, what? There's no one there. Okay, never mind. And then we heard a weird noise in the theater and they're like, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, can we go? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go. So we left. And then there was one time, I swear, we had this like weird, it's like DVD that would play before tours, and it was just like the same old-timey music, and it had like pictures from the theater's past, like I've been showing you, that was on screen. And there was one time where like the music was different, and it was a song that I'd never heard before, and it was really weird. And I was like, have I just never heard this? And the lyrics were strange. And so I was like, why have I never heard this? And I took out my phone to record it. And as soon as I hit record, like the sound glitched out. And then I hit stop and then it went back. And that happened like 2 times. And then it dropped and went back to the regular thing. And it was like it's probably just a glitch and something I haven't noticed. But I was just like, what's messing with me here? This is strange. So, yeah. Those are the only ghost stories I have.
So, in the 50s come TV, all these theaters start closing. Obviously, the one battle band guy was already working for Paramount. The theaters are closing. Did they lose a lot of money? Did they go bankrupt?
Some became porn theaters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was a big thing, too, yeah.
Oh, okay.
There are a lot of porn theaters, yeah.
So a lot of these palaces turned into porn theaters?
Yeah.
Yep.
Could happen tonight, man.
When did they actually, how old was the Paradise building when it came down?
Paradise opened in 28 and it was torn down, I want to say like 62, 63.
Oh, so it was there for a while.
Yeah, most of these places started coming down like early 60s through, urban renewal, early 60s through like 80s, 90s. And some of them are still coming down today, like even if people want to save them at their places that have been closed for 40 odd years. Like the Uptown, it can get to a point where it's hard to tear them down. The Balaban and Katz theaters, almost all, if not all of the ones that they built were done by the architectural firm of Rapp and Rapp though. And Rapp like way overbuilt their theaters, and they used a lot of steel, which is like one of the reasons why they say the Uptown is still standing and like needs a lot of work, but is still structurally solid because it's just way overbuilt. And the Paradise is another good example of that because they, I think that one they estimated it would take like 6 months to tear it down, and it took like 2 years. I think it like bankrupted the demolition company because these places are just like huge and super solid. Yeah.
So they didn't go bankrupt or anything. So that's B&K.
Oh, Balaban and Katz, no. They eventually just kind of got absorbed into other chains, and the brand name just fizzled out. Yeah. They didn't go, but a lot of other places did, and a lot of these theaters individually, they just kind of become these huge places that are too big to maintain, and people try and abandon them, stop using them, sell them off, chains go bankrupt, yeah.
So Chicago was the only one still actually operating?
No, there's several others. The Chicago is the one I talk about because I worked there forever and I love it. But like the Riviera Theater in Uptown is a Balaban and Katz movie palace. That's from 1918. The Congress Theater, which is I think undergoing renovations right now, is Lubliner and Trins was that name. Which what a name, Lubliner and Trins for like a theater chain. But that was the movie palace. The Oriental, now the Nederlander Theater. The Palace, which is like the Cadillac Palace downtown. These are all movie palaces.
The Admiral Theater ended up getting bought by a Balaban and Katz years later, and that's still a strip club.
Yeah, that one's still pouring.
And there's a couple of events that are they're taken off. They're not working, but they're.
What do you want to say about the SNA Theater?
About
SNA.
Oh, the movie studio?
Yeah.
It's got a cool lure. So SNA was a silent film company that was located close to the Uptown Theater, on like Argyle and Broadway-ish. That's my neighborhood in Uptown. And they were around, I forget their exact time frame, but it was not very long. A few years in the 19-teens. The building is still there. It's owned by St. Augustine College. When we were working with Atlas Obscura and with Adam over there, we were able to use one of the rooms they used to film silent films to screen silent movies, which was pretty cool. We did a Sherlock Holmes film that had been filmed at SNA Studios and then was lost and then was rediscovered, and then we re-premiered it in the studio that was involved with it, so it was pretty cool. Yeah.
We can take 2 more questions.
Is there a comprehensive list of all the Balaban Katz theaters, a website anywhere that lists everything that they built and owned and dates and for us other nerds and like that kind of stuff?
The 2 specific references I would give you for that, there is a book called like The Theaters of Balaban and Katz or something that was written by David Balaban, which is I think one of their grandsons.
He's an actor, isn't he? Well,
that's Bob Balaban,
Balaban,
who is an actor. Yes, he is. I forget which Balaban he's from. Yes, yeah, they're still involved in Hollywood, which is pretty cool. So it's just like a little small book. It's not any bigger than this. And that gives you like a good little overview inside of it. And then there is like the Balaban and Katz Foundation website, which looks like it has been updated since 1994. But that has a list of like all the B&K theaters too.
How often would the movies change in the 20s at the movie palaces?
Usually like once a week. So you'd have like a show set with the film at the Chicago, and then the next week it moved to the Tivoli, and the Chicago had a new one, and they kind of rotate them around. Yeah.
All right, give it up for Leyla.
Yeah, take it.
Really, pretty cute.
This is a friendly reminder that if you had a great time and you love Leyla, your donations today directly benefit her bar tab. Thank you guys so much for coming. We hope you join us next week. We have a lecturer named Patty Swanson who will be here
Oh, I love her.
talking about farms and agriculture.
And you should come because it's also her birthday next week.
Yeah, it's the only way I could get people to come to a lecture about agricultural history. So I just had to invite everyone. We had one great question in the comments that I wanted to address as a group. And somebody asked, how do we save these old theaters when they're at risk of demolition? Well, here in Chicago, you have two great resources for advocating for preservation of buildings in your community. You have preservation advocacy groups, Landmarks Illinois. If you're not subscribed to the Landmarks Illinois newsletter, you should be. Landmarks Illinois is a 501c3 nonprofit as well, and they do incredible advocacy work all over Illinois, saving historic buildings, and lately focusing a lot on landmarks that are not necessarily architecturally significant, but have huge importance to Chicago, like Muddy Waters House. So Landmarks Illinois deserves all your money, all your praise. So check out preservation advocacy organizations. Those are a great resource. The other one is your alderman. If you don't want a building torn down in your neighborhood, the best thing you can do is bother the hell out of your alderman and get all of your friends to bother the hell out of your alderman, because aldermen have a lot of power in Chicago, and they can help at least stay demolition. So if you don't want something to be torn down in your community, preservation advocacy groups, as well as local government. So make sure you subscribe to your local ward newsletter and stay engaged with local politics, because that's how you make actual fundamental change in your community. Woo! Who else is signed up to participate in their ward's participatory budgeting this year? Your hand's not up. Google participatory budgeting in my ward.
When is voting? When is the,
voting is coming up soon. Google it. Next week. I'll be there. Don't worry. Early voting has started, so please vote. Without further ado, we will wrap things up here tonight. Again, warm wishes for our bartenders in the back. Thank you. Thank you to Leyla. We hope to see you guys back here next week, virtually or beyond. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Let's look at those books or other ones I have with more pictures. You can meet me up here.
Yeah. Come look at our books.